Hello Matujima and watching HornbillTV. Imagine booking a once-in-a-lifetime cruise to one of the most remote places on Earth, the South Atlantic Ocean, near the isolated British territory of St. Helena. The goal is to see wild landscapes, seabirds, and the kind of untouched nature that most people only ever view on a screen. But for the passengers and crew aboard the Dutch cruise ship MV Hornbill, the voyage turned into a real-life medical thriller involving a rare virus, 3 deaths, a broken air ambulance, and an international race to contain the outbreak. Here is the full story of what happened, what Hantavirus actually is, why the specific strain involved is uniquely dangerous, and what health authorities are doing right now to stop it from spreading further. Now let's look at what we know about the outbreak. The World Health Organization confirmed on Thursday that 5 cases of hantavirus have been linked to the outbreak on the MV Hornbill. 3 additional cases are still under investigation. In total, 8 people have developed severe respiratory illness and tragically 3 of them have died. All 5 confirmed infections are caused by the Andes virus, which is a specific strain of hantavirus. The World Health Organization has alerted authorities in 12 countries whose nationals disembarked from the vessels while it was sailing near St. Helena. Those countries are Canada, Denmark, Germany, the Netherlands, New Zealand, St. Kitts and Nevis, Singapore, Sweden, Switzerland, Turkey, the United Kingdom and the United States. That means health officials on at least 3 continents are now tracking down passengers who may have been exposed before the outbreak was fully recognized. The Dutch cruise operator Ocean-Wide Expeditions has stated that there are 149 people from 23 different nationalities still aboard the MV Hornbill. The ship is currently making its way towards the Canary Islands, with arrival expected within the next few days. Meanwhile, the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control is conducting an assessment to determine which individuals aboard still require urgent medical evacuation while the ship is near Cape Verde. The remaining passengers and crew are expected to continue to the Canary Islands. Now, the World Health Organization Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus held a media briefing in Geneva where he said that the organization currently expects the outbreak to remain limited if public health measures are implemented quickly and effectively. However, he also cautioned that additional cases remain possible since authorities are still tracing passengers and close contacts across multiple countries. It is a painstaking process. Health workers must identify everyone who shared a cabin, a dining table, a lifeboat drill or any enclosed space with those who fell ill and then contact them even if they have already returned home to Singapore or New Zealand or the United States. To support testing efforts, the World Health Organization said that approximately 2,500 hantavirus diagnostic kits are being shipped from laboratories in Argentina to 5 different countries. Argentina has extensive experience with the Andes virus, which is endemic in part of South America, and its labs are equipped to confirm infections quickly. That rapid testing capacity is crucial because early diagnosis is one of the few tools that can improve a patient's chance of survival.
WHO has provided guidance to the ship's operator on the management of health on board the vessel. All passengers have been asked to stay in their cabins. The cabins are being disinfected, and anyone who shows symptoms will be isolated immediately. A WHO expert boarded the ship in Cabo Verde and has been joined by 2 doctors from the Netherlands and an expert from the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control, who will stay on the ship until it reaches the Canary Islands. They're conducting a medical assessment of everyone on board and gathering information to assess their risk of infection. WHO is developing step-by-step operational guidance for the safe and respectful disembarkation and onward travel of passengers and crew when they arrive. WHO has also informed 12 countries whose nationals disembarked in St. Helena. Those 12 countries are Canada, Denmark, Germany, the Netherlands, New Zealand, St. Kitts and Nevis, Singapore, Sweden, Switzerland, Turkey, the United Kingdom, and the United States of America. In addition, WHO is supporting health authorities in South Africa to follow up people who were on the flight from St. Helena to Johannesburg with the woman who later died. Meanwhile, investigations into the cause of the outbreak are continuing. Prior to boarding the ship, the first 2 cases had traveled through Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay on a birdwatching trip, which included visits to sites where the species of rat that's known to carry Hantavirus was present. WHO is working with health authorities in Argentina to understand the movements of the couple, and I thank the government of Argentina for its cooperation, given its experience and expertise with Hantavirus.
Now let's get to know more about the air ambulance that got stuck. In a strange and difficult twist, Spain's health ministry reported that 2 suspected Hantavirus patients who were evacuated from the cruise ship remain aboard a grounded air ambulance in the Canary Islands. The reason is not a lack of permission or political dispute, but a purely technical one, a failure in the patient's electrical support system. The aircraft had originally departed from Cape Verde and was expected to refuel in Marrakesh, Morocco, before continuing to Amsterdam for advanced hospital care. However, Spanish media reported that Moroccan authorities did not approve the landing request, forcing the plane to divert to the Canary Islands instead. Once on the ground, the electrical system that powers essential medical equipment malfunctioned. So the 2 sick patients are still inside the plane, waiting for repairs or a replacement aircraft. While hospitals stand ready to receive them, Spain earlier confirmed that it would receive the Hantavirus-linked vessels in the Canary Islands in accordance with international law and humanitarian protocols. That means the ship itself will eventually dock there, and the remaining passengers and crew will be assessed, tested, and either treated or allowed to continue their journeys. Now, what is Hantavirus? Now, let us talk about the virus itself. Hantavirus is not a new disease, but it is not a familiar one either. It belongs to a family of viruses that are primarily carried by rodent rats, mice, and voles. Humans usually become infected when they breathe in dust that has been contaminated with the urine, droppings, or saliva of an infected rodent. That can happen when someone sweeps a storage room, cleans a cabin, or disturbs a nest without realizing it. The virus can also enter the body through broken skin or, in rare cases, through the eyes, nose, or mouth after touching contaminated surfaces. The World Health Organization estimates that between 10,000 and 100,000 cases of hantavirus occur globally each year. Some strains cause only mild illness, while others lead to severe respiratory and kidney complications. The strain involved in MV Hornbill outbreak belongs to the most dangerous category. There are 2 main types of illness caused by hantaviruses. The first is called hemorrhagic fever with renal syndrome, which mainly affects the kidneys and is found mostly in Europe and Asia. The second is called hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, which attacks the lungs and is found primarily in the Americas. The Andes virus causes hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, and it is the more deadly of the 2. Without intensive medical care, the fatality rate for hantavirus pulmonary syndrome can be as high as 30 to 50%. Now, why the Andes virus is different? Most hantaviruses cannot spread from person to person. You catch them from rodents, and that is the end of the chain. But the Andes virus is the only known hantavirus in the world that is capable of limited human-to-human transmission through close contact. That is a crucial distinction. Health experts say that the suspected strain linked to the outbreak on the MV Hornbill is exactly this hantavirus variant. What does limited human-to-human transmission mean in practice? It means that if you are caring for a sick family member and come into direct contact with their blood, saliva or respiratory secretions, you could become infected. It has also been documented in healthcare settings when medical staff did not use proper protective equipments like masks, gloves and gowns. However, the virus is not airborne like measles or influenza. You cannot catch it just by being in the same room as an infected person who is breathing normally. Close, direct contact appears to be necessary. That is why the World Health Organization is tracking close contact specifically rather than treating every person on the ship as equally at risk. Even so, the fact that any human-to-human transmission is possible makes that Andes virus unusual and requires extra caution. It is also the reason why health authorities are not simply letting passengers scatter to the winds without follow-up. Now, let's look at the symptoms. One of the reasons hantavirus is so dangerous is that its early symptoms are easy to mistake for a common viral illness. Symptoms can appear anywhere between 1 week and 8 weeks after exposure. That is a very wide window, which makes tracing the original source of infection difficult. A passenger might have been exposed to rodent droppings, but they could just as easily have been exposed weeks earlier on land. The early stage of illness often begins with fever, headache, and severe muscle pain, especially in the large muscles of the thighs, hips, back, and shoulders. Many patients also experience nausea, vomiting, and stomach-related issues. At this point, it looks like a bad flu or a stomach bug. A doctor might send the patient home with fluids and rest. The danger comes when the disease progresses to the second stage, which can happen suddenly. The lungs begin to fill with fluid, causing shortness of breath and a rapid shallow breathing pattern. Patients may develop a cough and feel as though they are suffocating. Their blood oxygen levels drop and blood pressure may fall. This is hantavirus pulmonary syndrome in full force. Without immediate hospitalization, oxygen therapy and often mechanical ventilation from a breathing machine, the patient can die within hours. Severe infections progress rapidly from manageable to critical. That is why early diagnosis is considered the single most important factor for improving survival outcomes. If a doctor knows to test for hantavirus before the lungs fill with fluid, they can admit the patient to an intensive care unit and provide supportive care that keeps them alive while the immune system fights the virus. But because the early symptoms are so generic, many cases are not diagnosed until it is nearly too late. Now, treatment and prevention. No cure, no vaccine. Here is the sobering reality about hantavirus. There is currently no specific cure and no vaccine. You cannot take a pill that kills the virus, and you cannot get a shot to prevent infection in the first place. Treatment is entirely focused and supportive medical care. That means providing oxygen therapy to help the patient breathe, giving intravenous fluids to maintain blood pressure, and using a ventilator to take over the work of breathing for critically ill patients whose lungs are filled with fluid. In some cases, medications may be used to support heart function or to manage complications, but there is no antiviral drug designed specifically for hantavirus. Given that there is no cure, prevention becomes everything. The best way to avoid hantavirus is to avoid contact with rodents and their droppings. In homes, cabins, or storage areas that may be infested, experts recommend wetting down any dropping or nesting materials with a bleach solution or disinfectant before cleaning. This prevents the virus from becoming airborne in dust. Simple precautions like sealing holes in walls, storing food in rodent-proof containers, and setting traps can also reduce risk. On a cruise ship, preventing hantavirus requires rigorous pest control in all cargo holds, food storage areas, engine rooms, and living quarters. Once an outbreak occurs, as it has on the MV Hornbill, the focus shifts to isolating sick patients, tracing contacts, and ensuring that any contaminated areas are thoroughly disinfected before anyone else is exposed. Now, what happens next? The World Health Organization has made it clear that it expects the outbreak to remain limited, provided that public health measures are put in place quickly and effectively. But that is a big provided. Health authorities in 12 countries are now racing to contact every passenger who disembarked from the MV Hondius near St. Helena. Those passengers, many of whom are already back home, need to be tested and monitored for symptoms that might not appear for up to 8 weeks after exposure. The 2 suspected patients stuck on the grounded air ambulance in the Canary Islands are a dramatic reminder of how difficult medical evacuations can be when technical problems and international border approvals collide. They remain aboard the aircraft while engineers try to fix the electrical support system or arrange a replacement plane. Spain has already agreed to receive the ship itself in the Canary Islands under international law and humanitarian protocols, so the remaining passengers and crew have a clear destination. Now, the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control is actively assessing which individuals on board require urgent evacuations in Cape Verde. Those who are stable will continue to Canary Islands with the ship. Once they arrive, they will likely undergo testing and possibly quarantine. Depending on the latest risk assessments, for the rest of the world, the risk of catching Hantavirus from this outbreak is extremely low. The Andes virus does not spread easily between people, and the cruise ship was operating in a remote region. But for the families of the 3 people who died, for the 2 patients waiting on a broken plane, and for the dozens of passengers scattered across a dozen countries who now know they may have been exposed, this is not a distant news story. It is a present, frightening reality. The final chapter of the MV Hondius outbreak is still being written. Will the limited human-to-human transmission of Andes virus cause any secondary cases among close contacts? Will the 2 patients on the grounded air ambulance survive and receive proper care? And will the global tracing network manage to reach every passenger before it is too late? Those are the questions the health authorities are racing to answer, 1 call, 1 test, and 1 breath at a time. That's all we have for now. Keep watching Hornbill TV.